Our function must be compiled and stored in the database. The functions can be coded inside of the anonymous blocks too. We will see that. If you write a function inside of an anonymous block, you cannot use that function within an SQL expression because this is not stored in the database. So the database cannot recognize it. Only that anonymous block can use it. If your function includes an out parameter, you cannot use it inside of an SQL expression. Only in parameters are accepted. Of course, you can create a function without the parameters. You can use a non-parameter function within an SQL query too. No problem on that. Your function must return a valid type of an SQL data types. If you return a PLSQL specific data type, you cannot use that function inside of an SQL expression. For example, if your function returns a record, you cannot use that function inside of an SQL expression. Functions cannot be used in the check clause of the create or alter table statements and cannot be used as a default value of a column. You cannot call a function that contains a DML statement within an SQL query. If your function is updating or deleting something, you cannot use it within an SQL query. If your function includes a commit, rollback, or DDL statements, you cannot use it within an SQL expression. If your function has a select, update, or delete statements of a table, you cannot use that function within an update or delete statements of that table. For example, if your function has a delete or update statement of the table X or a select query of the table X, you cannot call that function within a query that has an update or delete command of the table X. The last restriction is, of course, you need to have the execute privilege for the functions if this function is created by another user. If you have created it in your schema, there is no need to have the execute privilege. But for the other schemas, you need to have it. This is also a need for the procedures too. Notice that these are the restrictions of functions when you use them within an SQL expression, not in the begin and blocks. But do not be afraid of these restrictions. Most of the times you don't face with these restrictions because functions are generally used for computing some values. You don't use functions to update or delete or commit something generally. But you may need sometimes. In case you need that at a time, you need to know these restrictions. Great. Now let me show you one more way of running the functions. Actually, this usage is valid for procedures too. Sometimes you may need to run the procedures or functions for testing, debugging, or running standalone. We can easily run our functions and procedures by using the SQL Developer tool. Now, let's open up our SQL Developer again. We simply right-click on the function name in our functions branch and click on the Run button. But before running, let me explain the other commands here. We can click on the Edit option here. If we do that, our functions will be opened and we can edit that function with this new window. We can export that create code of our function by clicking on the Export option. When you click on this, you will see a new window that will help you to export that code. But there is no need to export a function. When you double click on the function name, you will see exactly the same code. You can easily copy and paste. We can debug our function by clicking on the Debug option. We will see how to debug subprograms in the further lessons. We can compile our functions by clicking on the Compile option. Sometimes our functions may be invalid because of some reasons, like changing the data type of a table that's used inside of that function, or a structural change of a record that's used in our function, or something like that. There may be several reasons that makes a function invalid. If that structure is changed back to its old status, you don't need to change your function structure. But it is not turned to valid automatically. You need to compile it again. To do that, you can simply click on the Compile option here. If everything is okay, it will return to valid back. You can compile for debugging with the option below, but we will see this later in this course. You can call some of these options by using the shortcuts writing next to them. You can drop a function or grant, revoke a privilege to this function from this window. There are some other properties, but these are not so useful for now. But there is one more option here. It is Run option. When we click on the Run option, a new window is open for us. In this new window, we can see the parameters, types, and modes of these parameters, and the last assigned values. As you can see from the PLSQL block here, the structure is a bit different because this run window is for only running the function for testing or something. So you don't need the structure here. Now, to run our function, we need to specify the values of our parameters. We do that with the assignment section here. In this section, you assign the values of our parameters. In here, we write 50 here. We can write any number with the type of our parameter. There is nothing more to run the function except one more optional area. If you want to see the return value, you can open up this dbms output section. It's up to you. Now, let me uncomment that here. Let me delete here too and here. If you don't open up here, the returning value will not be printed on the screen. If you just want to run it, you may keep it commented. Great, now let's run it. As we can see, we could run our function with using the SQL Developer tool. It is sometimes a fast way. You can run many of the runnable objects like procedures with using SQL Developer like that we did here. To drop a function, you simply write drop function and your function name. Let me drop our function now. I simply write drop function and our function name get avg cell. Let's run it. As we can see, it's so simple. Dropping a procedure is very similar. You simply write drop procedure and your procedure name. Alright, now you know how to create the functions and the benefits and restrictions of them. We will create many functions throughout this course, so you will see many different uses of functions in the further lectures. So this is the end of this lecture. See you in the next lectures.